Chairman, thank you very much. I'm going to try to set the example of keeping question time to 5 minutes per member. I think if I can, and I have two questions for you, but if we have to squeeze it,
Okay.
I want to set a good example of getting off to the start here. In my opening statement, I discussed the long-term debt problems facing our country. There have been several serious bipartisan efforts, both in Congress and by outside groups in the past few years, to address this challenge. Groups like Fix the Debt, the Business Roundtable, Dinich-Rilin effort at the Bipartisan Policy Center all try to develop solutions to this. And official government efforts also included Simpson-Bowles, the Gang Six, the Super Committee, resulting from the Budget Control Act, and the so-called dinner club of senators, which I participated in. Unfortunately, all of these efforts failed to reach an agreement. I was particularly frustrated over the failure of the final effort, which started with the go big, ended up with simply the President rejecting even those proposals that he himself had previously endorsed as such as change CPI. I guess my question to you is, the President has 2 years left in this term. We've all acknowledged, I think, on a bipartisan basis that our continued deficit spending and plunge into extraordinary long-term debt presents serious consequences and challenges. So my question is the President and his team prepared to address this in his last 2 years? And what kind of encouragement can you give us? Because I'll say this in a bipartisan way, the can's been kicked down the road both by Republicans and by Democrat presidents. And the clock is ticking. And the question is, when are we going to have the will to do it? I think that reflects on all of us sitting up here on this dais, but also when will we have the leadership from the executive branch to cooperate with us in achieving this kind of result?
Thank you for your question. The short answer is the President stands ready to work on a balanced approach that would bring down our deficit over the medium and long run. It would build on the substantial progress we've made, bringing the deficit down from 9.8% of GDP to 2.8% of GDP, progress that was in part due to the strengthening economy, but in part due to a number of steps we've already taken. The Budget Control Act, the Affordable Care Act, and the tax agreement reached at the beginning of 2013. All three of those steps are working together to reduce our deficit. And so if you look out over the next 25 years, the fiscal gap, a measure of that deficit over time, has also come down substantially, but it hasn't come down to zero, which is why the President has a balanced set of proposals that include entitlement reforms and additional revenues from cutting tax expenditures for high-income households that together would bring down that deficit over the medium and long run.
Well, we know there's been some short-term progress here, and the CBO projects that short-term progress will last another year or two, but then the spike is on a pretty high angle here going forward in subsequent years to that. And so while we can perhaps celebrate some of the steps that have been taken, it comes nowhere close to dealing with the long-term problem. When do you think the President's willing to address that one last chance in his 8-year presidency to address that long-term problem?
I don't disagree. I certainly wasn't trying to claim that the problem is solved. It's not. But we've made a lot of progress on it. Over the next 25 years, CBO foresees a smaller deficit than they had foreseen, but it does come back and rise, as you correctly said, which is why we have proposed the steps we've proposed. I'd say those steps were very much in the spirit of a lot of the different deficit proposals you describe, in that it included revenue that you would get through tax reform and spending reduction. And it's bringing those two together in a balanced way that I think is a prerequisite for making meaningful progress on the deficit.
Well, I think that answer basically outlines the President's position. I'm not sure it leads to the kind of result that we're looking for, but to honor and to set the example for 5-minute questioning, I'll bypass